finish cattle, fair tail. I think it.
Yep, I don't know. Whatever y'all say. I'm gonna put that up unless y'all tell me I need it. Can you hear me in the back? All right. Are you going deaf in the front? All right. So, appreciate being here, and got a call a week ago. Kitty and got on a conference call with Kitty and Jennifer and everything, and they're like, Dr. Kern, could you come talk next Tuesday for our meeting? I've been doing this for a while. I should have been a little suspicious that it was only a week's notice that they were going to talk and he'd be talking to me, everything. But they go, you're the best. Our crowd loves to have you, and you do a really good job. They're just blowing my head up so big that I really wasn't getting thinking about this, getting the whole picture and everything. And get here, show up, here's people talking and stuff in the back. Well, y'all were supposed to be last Tuesday night. And I guess the speaker was supposed to come last Tuesday night, couldn't come tonight, so you were stuck with me. Well, I'm pretty sure my head shouldn't be that big, Anyway, I'm glad to be here, appreciate being here. Kind of asked me to talk about some herd health stuff, and so we're going to go through kind of the cow, the background in calf, and then also asked me to touch on some special things with regard to finishing cattle and what herd health things and different things I work with people and try to think about with regards to that. So I'll do that. As always. Oh yeah. Oops. Sorry, forgot. I meant to do that first. But yeah.
So this is also going to be a BQA recertification. So if you are already certified and need recertification tonight, here are the forms. I can hand them out to you. Keep your hand up. Sorry.
Yep, no. So recertification, this gets you 3 more years from today on. If you fill out that form and take the little 10-question test and pass it with a 70, you can get recertified, get your BQA go up 3 more years. So anybody that's interested in doing that. Now, if you're not BQA certified, this won't count for certifying for BQA. All right. So anyway, that's kind of what our plan is for tonight. Herd health programs, what, when, why. Kind of talk to you about some of that. Boy, you guys are a lot smarter than us on the eastern part or the western part of the state. Y'all mostly fall campers, right? We're glorious spring campers for the most part in Southwest Virginia. Because after all, it's not colder there than it is here or anything. More snow, So, I got 10 students that started a block, specialty block this past Monday, and we've got 49 heifers for them to cave out. Well, they didn't start till Monday, and so who do you think got to cave those things out all this past weekend? Thank goodness they did a pretty good job and had their calves and did well on their own, and I didn't have to do a whole lot. There's a little bitty calf laying there, but didn't feel a lot like spring calving on Saturday morning. I'm here to tell you, felt a lot like winter calving. But anyway, how do you know when you need to look for a new herd health program or a new veterinarian? When that's what it looks like on your barn. I don't know. It doesn't show up all that well on these bright lights and everything, but there's the most buzzards that I think I have ever seen on one barn, sitting there waiting for things to. Apparently, there's a lot of dead things around there. But anyway, all right. So, if we're looking at herd health protocols and vaccination and parasite control programs and everything, it's a tough deal, right? I work with a lot of people. I work with a lot of different producers that do things different ways and accomplish good goals and profitable deals different ways. And there's nothing wrong with that. So it's a complex combination of competing goals. Protection versus cost. I can sell you more vaccines and give vaccines more often and that sort of thing. Parasite control products, all that stuff. Let's go cost more, and so there's a balance act there where we get the most return for our money. Practicality versus ideal. Okay? Anybody in here AI? Okay, lots of you. All right, so, you know, I had the students, you know, I teach students for a living and stuff, and so I asked the students one time, all of them, to come up with their program for getting cows bred AI. What do you think the maximum number of sorts and trips down the chute you can make to get cows bred AI? Well, pretty easy. It's 42. Breed twice a day, every day, until you get them all bred. That's 21 days for the cycle, twice a day. I had a student that actually, that was their suggestion. 42 roundup sorts and breedings.
Oh, my.
That's a record that can never be broke. It can be tied, but unless you go to 3 times a day breeding, you can't beat that one, right? I mean, so, you know, I have seen herd health protocols that involve handling the cows every month of the year. Well, that's great, you know, but it's not very practical. When's the ideal time to apply lice treatment? It's January, right? That's the ideal time. Right now is the ideal time to treat cattle for lice. Are y'all getting your cattle up and handling them for anything else this month? Typically not. You know, so we'll tend to cheat lice treatment either earlier in the fall, which is less than ideal, might run out of lice control by the time spring runs around and that sort of thing, or we'll cheat it till later when we start preg checking and we'll maybe already start seeing some lice damage and that sort of thing, and hair loss and that sort of thing. Misconceptions versus science, right? So, you know, there's a lot of times where, you know, we do something and something happens and, you know, we think that that's why, and it's not always the case. And so sometimes the veterinarians, us as veterinarians, you as producers, we perceive things and think things happen because we did something, and maybe that's not really the case and not what science says should be. Then we get down to your individual farm level. There's lots of unique deals there. Labor. Do you have to wait till you trick your cousins to come help you work cattle one Saturday when they're going to come over, right? And they're available. You know, as a kid growing up, we had 25 mama cows plus a bunch of stocker calves. We had a neighbor that had 25 mama cows. I know this for a fact because my dad and that neighbor bought a bag of 50 tags and split them. That's why we only had 25 cows, and our cows were numbered 26 to 50. Our neighbors were numbered 1 to 25. So we had a third neighbor that had cows as well. Well, we worked cattle 3 Saturdays in a row because all 3 of them had day jobs, and so we go work one farm one Saturday morning. We go work another farm the next Saturday morning. We go work the other farm the other Saturday morning, and everybody would help everybody. You know, and so there are unique issues with labor, how much labor you have. Facilities. I can promise you one thing. I have never had a producer come up to me and say, Doc, I really hate that I put in some new facilities and better facilities. Never. 30 years. I've had a lot of people promise me, next year, Doc. I've even had some of them go out and buy the head gate, the chute, whatever, and it's still leaning over there against the barn when I show up. Year after year after year. Yeah. I did get one of those that I got pictures of his multiple times. He did get it in place this year. And so, you know, folks, I used to be young. I used to think it was bulldogging cattle was fun. Getting run over was only a slight problem. Folks, I was out helping gather up. We'd worked a bunch of bulls at a really big farm. We'd worked a bunch of bulls. We had 20 yearling bulls to do that. It was in the hills, the mountains of Southwest Virginia, and there were 20-some yearling bulls. And somehow I'm the one that's out on foot, and the rest of them are riding four-wheelers and side-by-sides. But I'm out on foot, you know, and we walked these bulls a fair piece of a way. We were doing them after we'd done the other bulls. The bull in the back turns around and kind of starts pawing the ground and looking at me. And I'm not really that far away. But I've kind of walked those hills for a little bit, plus we've already checked 80 older mature bulls that day, and I'm a little tired. I just looked at that bull and said, have at it. I ain't getting out of the way. I'm not faster than you. And if you run over me, it's not the worst thing that's going to happen today. You know, so, I mean, that's where I'm at, kind of, you know. Many of y'all might be there too. So, you know, facilities are an important thing, and having good facilities, folks, is a huge deal. The last thing you should do is say, I'm not going to do what I should do because I'm scared to get the cows up and work them. Right? I'm scared of getting hurt. I'm scared of the facilities falling apart. Those sort of things, and dreading that for the whole week leading up to doing that. If that's the case, then our facility needs some work. I've been quoted many times with the saying, if you own 2 cows and no head gate, sell a cow and buy a head gate. So, what are your goals? Sometimes our goals are to make a fair bit of money, make as much money as possible. Sometimes our goal is to have pets, and the cows have names. Y'all have heard me say this, right? If you have more than one cow with a name, you're a hobby farmer. You can have one with a name, or they can all have the same name, Huzzy. But if you've got 2 cows with names, then you might be a hobby farmer.
Can you have more?
You can have them all, they can all have names. But you're definitely a hobby farmer too. You know, I spent about 6 or 8 years raising baby Holstein calves when my kids were really young and that sort of thing. I got all from a dairy, I got all their calves. My kids, so I let my kids name them. They had to come out and help, and it was a good learning experience and chore for them. They only had like 3 names. They named Watch. One of the names was Watch. They named like 6 calves in a row Watch. I don't know if they wanted to watch for Christmas or what the deal was, or they wanted to watch it. I never figured that out. But they would come up with a name, and the next 6 calves would all have the same name. But anyway, I did let them name that. We have sheep now mostly at home, and they all got names. My dog. Oh, I'm a hobby sheep farmer. Let me tell you. I'm such a bad hobby sheep farmer, folks. I don't have one wether for a mascot. I no longer have 2 wethers for a mascot. I let my daughter talk me into selling a ewe lamb and keeping Dan. Now, how dumb is that? I already had 2. My wife had 2 ewes or 2 wethers as mascots. Now I got 2 wethers and I got Dan. I'm hoping my daughter will take care of me when I get old and in the nursing home. But anyway. Also, what's your past problems? Right? What problems have you had in the past? And that varies from farm to farm. Have you had particular problems with this disease, with that disease? Is there something management-wise or vaccine-wise we need to do differently on your farm over and above what the kind of baseline things we do are? But the bottom line is, while these should be unique to farms, and a little different from every farm here, they're all underpinned by the same science. And so therefore, they're going to look very similar to each other. They might be very slight variations based on these factors I talked about, but they all ought to be very similar. Now, here's something we've really heard about, right, folks? Herd immunity. With COVID, I mean, that's all you heard. When the U.S. gets up to herd immunity levels, we'll get rid of COVID, right? We get everybody vaccinated, exposed, all that stuff to get antibodies, you know. So it is an important concept. If we get a high enough percentage of you guys immunized here, then if the bug tries to get in here, it might make one person sick, but it won't spread through the whole rest of the group, right? And so that's important for highly contagious diseases like respiratory disease. We don't have to get every single calf protected against respiratory disease to protect the whole group. That doesn't mean one calf won't get sick, but we shouldn't have a train wreck. Okay? We need to get 60, 80, 90, depends on who you believe and look at there as to what percent will kind of work for herd immunity. But which is good because when we vaccinate things, we don't get 100%, particularly with a single dose of vaccines. But then there are other diseases, particularly the ones that aren't really infectious diseases that the animals kind of carry in their body and are exposed to and that sort of thing, like blackleg, clostridial diseases, where getting every calf protected becomes important, because we're not then looking at herd immunity with those type diseases, but we need to get every single calf protected, because if I fail to get one person protected, then if they happen to be the one that gets the bruise and gets the spores from clostridial disease in their muscle, they get blackleg and die. Sorry, you're dead.
Sorry. Thanks.
Another great thing we learned out of COVID, right? When are you protected after vaccination? If you only got to have a single dose of the vaccine, then you're going to reach maximum immune protection somewhere between 2 and 3 weeks after you've been vaccinated. Folks, that's a fairly universal rule. It's fairly true for most every vaccine out there in most every species. You can pretty much take that one to bank. That's kind of biology. That's the way the immune system works, and that's how long it takes. Is there a little bit of protection before you get to that? No, that's why they said it's fine to come to you. You know, I had to wear a mask 18 hours a day at work, but it was fine for 65,000 people to come to a Virginia Tech football game as long as they've been vaccinated 2 weeks before. You know, it's right beside each other, you know, but 2 to 3 weeks is when you're going to get maximum immunity. Now, the vaccine requires a booster, so now we got to get 2 shots to be protected. It's going to be a couple of weeks after that second shot when we're going to be protected. So that's what we're going to think about and do and everything. Okay, the other concept then is the immune system has 2 different branches, 2 different arms. There are 2 different parts of the immune system. Okay, there's the humoral part. That's the part we've talked about and known about for a long, long time. You know, and that's antibodies. We can easily measure those in the blood and that sort of thing. And so that's the important deal there. Okay, mostly the only protection that you get from killed vaccines is, do you need me to stop?
No, you're good.
walking?
No, you're good.
Okay.
Keep going.
So, they're recording this. I'm pretty sure that in addition to getting me to speak, they're also, my other suspicion is, they're figuring I'm going to say something that's going to get me in trouble, and they're trying to get me fired tonight. So.
100%.
I probably deserve it. I've said a bad thing or two about Kitty and Jennifer over the time, so I probably deserve it. So, anyway, so the killed vaccines do a good job of stimulating those antibodies. The problem with the killed viral vaccines is they don't do a good job of stimulating the other half of the immune system, which is the cell-mediated immunity. Those are the cells, particularly diseases like IBR virus. They really are best protected from this other half of the immune system that works from modified live vaccines and what we call cell-mediated immunity. We change gears a little bit there. This is what I like to think about. When I sit down with you and say, let's talk about a herd health program, let's talk about what you want to do, here's my 4 F's of vaccination. Okay? Normally an F's a bad thing, but in this case it's a good thing. And so what do we vaccinate for? What diseases? How do we figure that out? Fatal diseases. Okay? If it's going to kill you, and you're just going to go out and find them dead and not find them sick and have a chance to doctor them, then we better vaccinate for that, because that's the only chance we got is to prevent it. Clostridial disease, blackleg is a prime example of that. Almost always just go out and find that animal dead, and if you find it still alive, mostly you're just going to watch it die in front of you. Okay? Frequent diseases. So if it happens often, we ought to treat those. We ought to try to prevent those because they happen a lot, and so preventing them would be in our best advantage. And then what I have in there, financial advantage. That's like the VQA program that many of you participate in with Buckingham Cattlemen's Association. Got a pretty good premium for your calves you sold in August, right? A really good premium. Seemed like a really good price, so it kept going up for the rest of the year, but it was still a really good price, right? And relative to what you could have sold cattle for that day, unvaccinated and that sort of thing, it put a lot of money in your pocket. Roughly how much, Jennifer, per head?
The total was around $530,000.
$530,000. Pretty good. And then effective vaccines. We have lots of vaccines out there. Some are more effective and better than others and that sort of thing, and so we'll try to use those. What are my critical use vaccines? So if I'm thinking about vaccines, then I think pretty much everybody here if you own more than maybe one cow, ought to be using, it would be these, right? In calves, it's blackleg because it's a fatal disease, and it's respiratory disease because that's the one that happens most common in calves, right? So those would be our critical use vaccines. We might add more vaccines in, but then that would be an individual discussion with your veterinarian, like Dr. Davis who's here, and that sort of thing. Whoever you work with a veterinarian to say, should we add these other things in? They would not be in my critical use category that most everybody should be using. For cows, it's reproductive failure. We don't sell $1,700, $1,800, $1,900 steers out of a cow that doesn't get pregnant or a cow that aborts. So if we can do anything, while it doesn't happen all that often, it's the most frequent thing with cows. And so that's where we want to put our effort and time into doing on that end. So I'm going to go over this slide just for a second because I'm going to use this exact same slide for several slides here to look at, and then a few more at the end later on. But they're all going to be based around this. So, you know, we've got the cow that's pregnant until she can't start, our calving season starts, and then they're open, and then our breeding season starts. We either AI and turn the bull in, or just turn the bull in, turn the bull out. Our cows are pregnant there. You know, our calves are on the cows, and then we've got our weaned calves out here after we wean them off. That's assuming we're going to background those calves and maintain them ourselves, right? Which is an important consideration for your vaccination program. So when's blackleg a problem? So blackleg classically is a problem from a few weeks, month, 6 weeks of age. Rarely a little bit earlier than that, but generally not. Most common time, the vast majority of blackleg cases I see are kind of 400 to 600 pound calves. That's the most common. It's not the only ones, you know. And then they're still susceptible on out here, you know. And I've got a slide later to talk about that. But less than a year of age, most susceptible. 1 to 2 years of age, less susceptible, but still susceptible. And over 2 years of age, it's pretty rare that cows get blackleg. They can get some other clostridial diseases, but not typically blackleg. So if that's when the problem is, that's when we need to protect it. For respiratory disease, you know, most of our respiratory disease problems are going to happen after we wean calves if we keep ownership of them. Now, I will say, I don't know how much you guys have seen, but I have seen a little more winter pneumonia in fall-born calves this year, and talked to a few more people across the state that have had a little more winter pneumonia than is typical. Has that been the case for you guys or not really? Okay, that's good if y'all hadn't had that problem, because that one's harder to deal with and try to figure out, but most of our protection is going to come here, because where most of our problems are going to be, they're going to be after we wean those calves. And then reproductive losses, well, this is why they told me I was so good and the speaker they wanted to have and everything. You can only have reproductive losses if you're pregnant. You know, that's the most. Too bad that's not a question on the test for tonight, but you know, that's the only time you have reproductive losses. But that's when we got that. So, going all the way back to my predecessor, Dr. Whittier, you know, my recommendations and that sort of thing. This has been our critical use kind of template for what we think is the best vaccination program for a herd. So, using a modified live respiratory virus plus Lepto5, a product like Pyramid 10, NovaShield 5L5, Express 10, Vista 5L5, those type products, that's what we think we give there. Okay? We come back at preg check and booster the Lepto. For the calves, you know, when they're all on the ground, you'll have a few calves that are a little younger than we'd ideally want, back to the practicality versus the ideal. But sometime when those calves are, you know, a few weeks old, the oldest ones are a couple months old, giving them a blackleg shot, 7-way clostridial there. And then pre-weaning, coming back with a modified live 5-way with the Mannheimian hemolytic products like Pyramid 5 Response, Vista 5 once, NovaShield 5 1 shot. Those type products are what we want to think about from that standpoint. Well, lo and behold, in 2013 or 14, this George Perry study came out, and he said, if you vaccinate cows, they won't be as likely to get pregnant. So that thing you all been recommending is not as good, and that sort of thing. Made the lay press even before it made the scientific press somehow, and not supposed to happen that way, but it did. And so there were a lot of concerns and that sort of thing. Fair number of cows in that study. So I was concerned. There are people that then started talking about, let's get 2 to 3 doses of modified live in those replacement heifers before they're bred, and then let's just use a killed at preg check on those cows. Okay, so that became fairly popular thing to recommend, and a lot of talk in the veterinary community and the animal science community, and everything as to maybe that's the way we ought to be doing it. Maybe what we've been doing has been causing harm. Okay, well, I have a few issues with that. If we vaccinate here, then we're all the way back around to here, and our immunity is starting to wane by the time our most likely reproductive problem is going to happen. Plus, it's not nearly, killed virus vaccines are either not or not nearly as good at preventing BVD PI as modified live vaccines are. Also, by label, we were not supposed to vaccinate the calves while they're still nursing the cow with a modified live if the cows had it. So, but by the same token, I was a little concerned, right? Here's a recommendation I've been making, telling producers you can do it. We had a study. We had a pretty good study with 800 cows in it, saying it was fine to do, and so we were pretty comfortable with that. But now here's another study that came out, and so I'm like, I don't want to be causing your cows not to get pregnant based on my recommendation. That would make me not sleep good at night, and I got enough old bones and aches and pains to not sleep good at night on my own. So we designed a study. We had 1,200 cows in this study, and we gave half of them modified live and half of them killed virus vaccine when we put the cedar in. They all got AI'd. We got 53% in the modified live vaccine and 52% in the killed. No harm whatsoever in those cows that had been previously vaccinated with a modified live. Now they'd had a modified live every year before that for their whole life. Well, sat down with George Perry at a meeting, a kind of a think tank meeting type thing and stuff, and he's like, I don't like your study. It's not, you didn't have a negative control. So you harmed them all. Okay, George, I don't believe that. I don't think that. Explain to me what the scientific rationale is for that. And he couldn't really, but, maybe he's right. So we then went back and took 2,000 cows and gave half of them modified live when we put the cedar in for the AI program. And the other half, we just gave a killed vaccine, so true negative control. They didn't get anything. We put cedar in. Well, guess what? No difference. I am very, very comfortable. We now have almost 4,000 cows that we've done this research on, and we have not shown any harm in vaccinating modified live cows. Cows with modified live vaccine 10 days before the bull went in, 10 days before you ate on them, however you want to look at it from that standpoint. There's one study out there where they did it at pulling the cedar and giving Lutalyse shots, so 2 to 3 days before they got bred. I really think you could do it the day you turn the bull in, but we don't have data to support that. But there is at least one study out there that did that. So the take-home message is modified live vaccines. They're important protection for several of our common diseases of cattle. The modified live vaccines are safe to be used as little as 10 days prior to AI or turning the bull in, as long as those cattle have been previously vaccinated with a modified live annually. Okay? That is only true with the second half of that statement, folks. 100%. Because the key thing is that third statement. If the cattle are naive, Now, what does naive mean? Naive means they have not been vaccinated with a modified live in the last 12 months. They've only been vaccinated with killed. They hadn't been vaccinated. I promise you, you will see decreased reproductive performance for 20 to 30 days. Those studies go all the way back to the 1960s when modified live vaccines were the first vaccines we have and first came out. We learned that immediately as soon as those vaccines came out. So, if you don't know, they're naive. Okay? When somebody comes to me and says, well, doc, I want to do this. What'd you vaccinate for? What'd you vaccinate with last year? I'm not sure. I think it was that 9 or 10 or... They're naive. So, nope, that's the way we need to use those products. That's how they're made to be used. Kitty can maybe speak after I do, talking about what her products are that do this, and are used for this, or you go up and talk to her later, but she has a number of products from that standpoint. Switching gears from vaccines, let's talk about parasite control in fall calving herds. Okay, so what are we going to look at parasite control wise? Okay, so how do calves get worms? How do cattle get worms? Off the ground when they are doing what? Grazing. That's exactly right. So when they're not grazing, they're not getting worms. So even though, unless you calved in July, your calves were not old enough to graze a little bit and pick up worms out there, because most of the worms have gone to hypobiotic and everything. And so we don't have to worry about this until spring. Okay, for these fall-born calves. Timing of deworming for your fall-born calves depends on 3 factors. When you wean. What I'm going to call early weaning, April and May, versus later weaning for fall calves, which is late May into June. There's 2 pretty distinct timelines with people I work about when they wean calves. Some of it has to do with marketing. Some of it has to do with the amount of time they got to be weaned with your program to market those calves and sell those calves. Lots of different reasons that people do things. But I work with people that wean anywhere from April all the way through to the middle 20th of June for fall calves. Okay? What product you use matters as well, and when you're working cattle for other things. Because like I said, there's an ideal time to deworm these calves, but I'm going to try my best to not make you get those cattle up just to deworm them. If I can help it. So we look at worms and when they're a problem here in this area from April on. Right? You're a few weeks earlier than us for flies and grazing and that sort of thing, but we're essentially talking about from April on. Let's say cattle start making their living and really being able to graze grass first week in April. Perfect time to deworm them would be 3 weeks after they started really grazing very much and they picked up a few worms. Now we can hit them with dewormer and knock those few out they picked up, and try to cut down on before they start producing eggs. So, that's what we're looking at there. What are options for deworming fall-born calves? Well, deworm at weaning. If you're an early weaner, so you're weaning in April, early May, then that's when I would deworm those calves. Okay? That would be the ideal time. Even if you're pre-weaning vaccinating back here in March, to get that immunity protection before you wean them, that's really too early. Your dewormer's here and gone before there's really any worm problems. Okay? If you're late weaning, so late May into June when you're weaning those calves, then when you give those pre-weaning shots, a few weeks before weaning is actually when I deworm those calves. So I changed my deworming schedule based around handling those cattle, and when I do that, depending on what time I wean calves. Now, an exception for that is a product called Long Range. Long Range provides 100 days of continuous deworming. There's 100 days of blood levels of that product to kill the worms. And so you can use that product and cover a really long time frame and hedge your bets with when you handle those cattle and still protecting them through when you're going to be marketing them and that sort of thing, you know, and into fall before you have replacement heifers that need to be dewormed again. Do I need to deworm them again? Well, once again, that comes down to when you dewormed them, when you're going to sell them, and what product you used. If you use long range, then no. You've got pretty much season, you got summer long, at least particularly up until those cattle are going to be marketed for most of y'all in early August. You've got season long worm control. If you use other products, it really depends on how long it's been since you dewormed them and what product you used. That would be a thing to discuss with your veterinarian on an individual product and looking at the timing of that and whether we should do strategic deworming where we give those calves a second deworming to get some extra growth. So to kind of summarize, if we go to fall calving, we'll skip spring. The modified live vaccine and lepto de-lice, because I don't know when else de-lice your fall cows, folks. That's way too early, but I have a hard time making you run cattle down the chute in January just to de-lice them. If you're going to do that anyway, or you're going to be preg checking relatively early in or mid-February, late February, because, you know, that's been long enough since the bull's been out. If you bred really early, then you can kind of wait till then and probably be okay. But I have a hard time making people run cattle down the chute just to de-lice them. Like I said, it's far from ideal, but it's practicality. Good time to give 7-way Clostridial. Castrate, consider implanting depending on your marketing program. And then we talked about the timing of the vaccination programs and the deworming for those cattle and what those include, you know, and what that, we talked about that. And then lepto booster, baby fly control when you preg check those cows depending on when it was. Skip that one. All right, so backgrounding. When are we trying to prevent problems with our backgrounding deal? So now we've moved past the cow-calf operation, and we've said we're going to wean those calves, and we're going to own those calves on our farm for a period of time, either until we sell them as wean calves and backgrounded calves, or until we ship them to the feedlot, retain ownership ourselves, or until we finish them, and that sort of thing. So when are we trying to prevent problems? Okay, it's the respiratory problems at weaning for us, and as importantly, folks, it's the respiratory problems for the person buying our calves. Reputation of cattle buyer is no different than reputation of somebody in high school. It's really hard to get a good reputation, and it's really easy to get a bad reputation. And if you get a bad reputation, running around with the wrong crowd, getting in trouble and that sort of thing, that's a hard thing to shake. It's the exact same thing here. What are we selling when we sell backgrounded calves? We're selling our reputation. High quality cattle. Y'all got high quality cattle in Buckingham County? I'm going to try one more time and then I'm going to walk out. Do y'all have high quality cattle in Buckingham County? Yes. Thank goodness. Jim Myers was rolling over in his grave for a second there, folks. I love Jim to death. There we go. Now everybody's not asleep. I'm going out to the truck and get the hot shot. Okay, you do, right? We got to keep them healthy for the next person that buys those cattle and have everything go good from that standpoint. So, vaccination, fence line weaning. How likely are calves to get respiratory disease on your farm with weaning? If you do fence line weaning. Fence line weaning, our lowest stress method of weaning. Absolutely, they're not that likely to be stressed. I care less whether or not you got this vaccine in pre-weaning because I don't expect you to have a lot of trouble with weaning. Now, if you fence line wean on 2 or 3 farms and then commingle those calves later, guess when your problem's likely to show up? When you commingle those calves later, if you fence line weaned on 2 or 3 farms. Have some people that have had some chronic problems with that. Okay? What we need to do is make sure we get that second dose of vaccine in at least 2 weeks before they get on the truck to go, so that those animals are maximally protected for the next guy. We got to get our first vaccine in them sometime with y'all's marketing program. We get a second dose in them, and we need at least 2 weeks, and that's for the reasons I told you why we needed that. Dry lot weaning. Okay, so now we're putting them in a lot, right? What we had to do when I was a kid, because our fences weren't good enough to keep calves in. We had to put them in the only place that had good enough fence to keep cattle in them. Less than ideal, but many people need to or have to do that. Then we need to, a few weeks before weaning, ideally 2 to 3 weeks before weaning, maybe just a little bit longer than that, depending on what we're doing. We vaccinate those calves, so now they're protected for us when we wean those calves. And then we get that booster in them, that Buckingham Cattle Association deal, 2 to 3 weeks before they ship minimum, so that they're protected for the next guy. Now, this isn't nearly as good, right? Vaccinating them at weaning is not as good, folks, as vaccinated pre-weaning. Now, I'm running a race. When do cattle get sick after stressors? 7 to 21 days. Right? Shipping fever, cattle you buy off the market, that sort of thing. They get sick 7 to 21 days classically. How long did I say it take for your vaccine to start working really well?
2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, 14 to 21 days. We can make this work, but if we do this, the rest of our weaning program better be really good. We better be really good about having feed that the cattle want to eat. We better be really good about reducing the other stressors. We better not put them in an old turkey barn with no ventilation. People call me about that all the time. You know, those are problems. So we can make this work, but we got to do a better job with the other things. Okay? Retained ownership or sell them with your marketing program. If you're retaining ownership of these cattle in the feedlot phase, who gets the advantage if they live at the feedlot? You do. You get every calf that dies comes out of your pocket. I mean, I just talked to a guy this morning on the phone that lost 2 calves in Nebraska it was minus 30 out there. He lost 2 calves to the storm, to the weather out there, just simply because of the weather. Okay? Those were calves he thought were going to sell for $3,000+, right? Hurts. Hurts when you lose those calves. And so, having this vaccination program, it's no different than the one that you have for your Buckingham group. That's going to give you your maximum ability to keep those calves alive. All right, let's take it one step further. Now we're talking about programs for finishing cattle. What do you do after background? What are we thinking about? What's our thought processes there if we're going to keep some cattle and keep them through finishing? What are the opportunities? Okay? One of the opportunities is to cut every middleman out, right? Let's get rid of every middleman. Let's get rid of the market. Let's get rid of the stocker guy. Let's get rid of the feedlot. I'm going to try to recoup all the profit that's in this calf by not selling it till it's hanging upside down. Market calves that otherwise do not fit well into the system. This is one of the most common things that people do with freezer beef, what I call freezer beef. Okay, right? You got a bad-eyed calf that doesn't make the sale in August. Folks, in 2014, I had an 850-pound Holstein that I took to Whitfield Livestock Market to sell on their special graded Holstein sale because that was the only decent way to market Holstein calves at the time. Okay, took it on Tuesday. It had a bad eye. I knew it had a bad eye. Just hoping that it would pass. It didn't. This is a Holstein steer, folks. It sold on Thursday. I left it down there after it failed. The regular sale was on Thursday. I got $500 less than if that calf had gone in the pen. For a Holstein, that case of pink eye cost me $500 on that calf. Now, how could you recoup some of that? Was that Holstein going to eat any worse if he had 1 eye or 2 eyes? No. He was going to eat the same, both him eating and somebody else eating them. So that, you know, I have a lot of clients that take those small frame calves, right? Small frame calves actually aren't all that bad, and we'll talk about why here in a minute. Smaller frame calves are not that bad to sell because guess what? They're not as big. I got a guy called me Saturday bragging about a calf he took last week with the carcass weight for a custom kill 1,040 pounds. Is that a good thing? No. What is the bill? He sold that thing to one individual. What is the bill going to be for that calf?
The same as a 15.
It's going to be about $4,500. Now, how many people out there want to write you a check for $4,500 for a beef? How many people got freezer space to put this beef in? You know, so it's actually advantageous oftentimes to have the little smaller calves to slaughter. You don't take your best ones and keep them. You take your smallest ones and increase their value from that standpoint. They've got a little lameness or that sort of thing. Genetic misfit's got a hair lip, something wrong with it. It doesn't harm the meat at all, but just not good enough to be able to market that way. Fill a niche market. Somebody wants grass fed. Some people are filling that market, non-implanted cattle, local, that sort of thing. You know, there's lots of things from that standpoint. What are the challenges? Marketing. By far and away, the way most of these things fall apart is people having to market them. We got the internet now, we got the Facebook and all that stuff where you can do that, and market them that way, and so that helps. Okay? You gotta like to be around people, right? You gotta like to talk to people, you gotta like to talk to people maybe you wouldn't have talked to otherwise. You know, so, I mean, some people like that, some people don't. Some people don't want everybody coming to their farm and doing that sort of thing. Cost of gain. I'm here to tell you that for sure, none of you are going to feed these steers as cheap as a 50,000 head feedlot in Texas, Kansas, Nebraska. They're going to do it cheaper. Doesn't mean you can't still make money, but realize that you're not doing it as cheap as they are. There's no possible way. Unless you don't count your labor and half your feed and everything. So, value of money. How many people have run a budget lately on buying a group of calves? That sort of thing. 6 months, how much the interest right now? Calves sold last night on the VQ on the tele auction for DCA. Got guys running budgets for those. $80 to $150 interest, depending on how long, whether it was a 5-week heifer they were buying and how long they were going to keep them, if they're going to keep them all the way till next fall and graze them through the summer. We're talking a lot of money. I mean, I didn't even bother counting interest 3 or 4 or 5 years ago because it was almost non-existent. Didn't matter much. Today, having that money tied up is a fairly good expense. Cost of processing, that's a huge one. You know, it costs a lot of money to get these deals. We talked about size of carcass and that sort of thing and thinking about those. From a veterinary standpoint, disease standpoint, what's our biggest deal? It's clostridial disease, right? So if there's one vaccine we're probably going to try to keep putting in these calves every 6 to 12 months, it's a booster on their blackleg. So if you're going to continue to own those animals and own them longer, that's the one thing that I'm really going to push you hard on. For respiratory disease, they're not really, these old long yearlings, they're not at a lot of risk to develop respiratory disease, particularly if you only got a handful of them. You can certainly booster them annually for that, particularly if you're slow growing them on grass and you're going to own them for a long period of time. But long yearlings don't tend to get sick. You know, that's one of the beautiful things about them. They tend to be pretty healthy and don't have a lot of problems with respiratory disease or that stuff. So health programs, we just talked about that. All right. So, sorry you didn't get the speaker you were supposed to get last week and you got stuck with me. I appreciate getting a free meal out of it and everything. I appreciate getting to come see a lot of you people that I know, you know, and everything. And now I'll take questions on anything I've said you agree with, disagree with, or any other topic. Yes.
The IBR pediatric BBD modified live.
Yes.
So if those calves are vaccinated before the Buckingham Saint,
Mm-hmm.
as
Yes, sir.
heifers and steers.
Yep.
Those calves that you keep, replacing heifers, go into the herd. You talked a lot about giving a booster before you breed.
Yep.
Normally, we give it at pregnancy check. Is that a problem?
Do you give another modified live, or do you kill product like Triangle 10 or Fire Shield 6L5?
Any modified line?
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of giving it to pregnant cows, and here's why. It's approved. It's on the label that says you can. They got that because the way we tested that to prove that the modified live wouldn't hurt cows is they get if you vaccinated the calves and the mother's nurse they got those together is they vaccinated the cow pre-breeding and then they vaccinated her while she was pregnant. And if that didn't abort her, they said, well, it can't possibly get any more than that from the calf, and so it'll be fine. So that works. Now, here's my concern, and then I'll let you ask or say whatever else. The concern is there have been numerous incidents where that has not proven to be the case. I do not believe there's anything wrong with the science. I looked at the science. The company approached us about doing one of these research projects. For the safety and efficacy, we didn't wind up doing it, but I looked through all their studies and worked with them and followed the studies. Multiple companies have done that. The science is sound and it's safe, as long as you got that vaccine right. Where there's problems, something happened on the front end and Dave's cow didn't get vaccinated. You forgot. You didn't handle the vaccine properly and it was not truly a modified live. You know, it got killed before it got in the animal and that sort of thing. And so that's what concerns me a little bit about that. But that's the only thing that concerns me. Like I said, as long as you're doing that, then that's okay. But one of the primary reasons people want to vaccinate pregnant cows is to try to prevent antibodies and get antibodies into the calf. And quite honestly, a killed vaccine will do a better job of putting antibodies in the colostrum than a modified live will, because that's what they're good at, producing antibodies.
We've been told, all of this,
Yep,
Dr. Whittier,
yep,
that if we go through the Buckingham program,
yep,
giving shots to all our calves,
yep,
keeping every 12 months, making sure they get a shot, which the
Yep.
couple will
Yep.
get shot in March.
Yep.
When we normally pregnancy check. And we make sure they get that shot.
Yep.
It shouldn't be a problem giving it to them when we pregnancy check them versus before. Because before, we're getting feedback from the companies, they don't want us to be giving them shots 2 weeks ahead of the.
I'm here to tell you that's a bunch of crap.
I know.
I got more cows than anybody else in the country. I did all these studies myself, and so I'm biased, but we did these things right, folks, and there's nothing wrong. 100%. I will die on that sword that my data is right. Now, the much more so because there are tons of case reports out there of people doing what you do and then have a bad abortion story. And I don't, and like I said, the science these companies did was good on that. And if you handle it right and do everything right, and the cows aren't thin and they respond to the vaccine, I don't think there's any problem. But I see too many train wrecks where obviously that wasn't the case.
We have to start synchronizing like in November to get these animals. So when do you get the shot? Before you start synchronizing?
The day you synchronize the animals when you handle them anyway. That was the whole reason Dr. Weir and I started down this path to do that, because we didn't want you to have to handle them an extra time if you didn't have to.
Well, that's the reason we did it when we pregnancy checked.
Right. So the day when you start the synchronization, that's when you vaccinate it. When you got already handle them anyway.
So you have no problem with when you synchronize them initially to go ahead and give them that?
I have no problem as long as they were vaccinated the year before. I have absolutely none. Yeah, zero. And like I said, I am as sure as I can be that that's right.
So, give it to them when you initially synchronize them.
Yep.
Like you
Put the cedar in. That's where every one of those cows in that study got their modified live vaccine.
Now, see, they're on the 14-day program. The heifers are like on the 30-day program. They're on a different
Right.
program for synchronization.
Longer's not going to hurt you.
Okay.
Longer's not going to hurt you. It was the concern, absolutely. Now, like I said, what you do I believe the science works, but I deal with train wrecks. And so I get scarred by train wrecks, and that's what I see happening, and that's my concern from what you're describing.
But, all right, the lepto.
Yep.
I think you mentioned it being critical.
Yep.
So at pregnancy check, you could give them.
I give them a booster at preg check.
Is that
Just
live or is that-
that's just killed bacteria. That's a bacteria that's killed.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Good question.
Remember to repeat the question.
Oh, remember to repeat it. You were supposed to remind me that before.
Well, you went really fast.
Look, I'm from Southwest Virginia. I don't do anything really fast.
I don't interrupt either. So
Yes.
So, I know you had up there at Frank Checks to give the lepto booster to the cows.
Yep.
Is there any advantage to give the cow a black leg at Frank Checks for the calf colostrum?
That's a very good question. So the question is, should I give the cow black leg? So there are 2 or 3 things to consider with that deal. There is a slight chance that the cows could get some protection. They probably need it just like you do for tetanus. They probably need every presidential election year. They probably need a blackleg booster to try to kind of help them. Now, can you remember that? I can't remember that, right? So every Olympic year, is it the Winter Olympics, is it the Summer Olympics? You know, they don't need it every year for themselves, but they probably could benefit. There is a slight risk for those cows. So there's a slight advantage to vaccinate those cows every year. It's not big, but it's a little bit. And so you think about that from the cow standpoint. From the calf standpoint, if you're vaccinating those calves at an early age, weeks to a couple months old, probably doesn't matter whether they got colostral immunity or not. If you're not going to vaccinate them to pre-weaning or weaning for blackleg, then absolutely trying to provide them as much colostral immunity to blackleg by vaccinating them then would be. So it depends, I hate to say it depends, but it depends a little bit on if you're going to get that first blackleg shot in that calf at a few weeks to a few months of age or not. If that's the case, I don't care. It doesn't hurt anything. Fine that you did that, but I don't think it's really that helpful if you do it from that standpoint.
Is there any harm in giving older cows blackleg?
Is there any harm in giving older cows blackleg? I can't just give y'all a yes/no answer, can I? Almost never. If you gave them a blackleg, a salmonella vaccine, a scour vaccine, and a pink eye vaccine when they're pregnant, then yes. There's too many vaccines there for a pregnant cow, too many vaccines that have a lot of this stuff we call endotoxin in them, and you run a risk of aborting them. So unless that's where you work with your veterinarian like Dr. Davis or whoever your veterinarian is, unless you're dumping all those things in that cow when she's pregnant at the same time, then no, there's no harm.
We give them modified live and the blackleg pre-breed.
Yeah, no problem. No problems. No problems there.
I have a question.
Yes, sir, sorry.
How early can you give a calf a shot for blackleg?
Question is, how early can you give a calf a shot for blackleg? Personal opinion, I don't particularly like the newborn baby calf blackleg shot. That's a terrible time to vaccinate an animal. They're full of cortisol, dexamethasone, that was caused to have birth. And so that interferes with them responding and that sort of thing. They're also pretty stressed, and that interferes with responding. I would, back to the ideal versus practicality, I'd love for that calf to be 45 to 60 days old before you vaccinate them. You're not going to go out and vaccinate it. This calf goes it's 50 days old today, and that calf goes it's 50 days old tomorrow. So, kind of right after they've all come, the oldest one's probably 90 days, the youngest one's probably a week at that point. To me, that's the ideal practical time to vaccinate.
Okay, the reason I asked the question.
Yes, sir.
A friend of mine was having problems with blackleg when the calves were born, basically. And another one I worked with, 10 years ago.
Yep.
He had the same problem. The vet recommended he give a calf a shot for blackleg as soon as they hit the ground.
Okay, so that's back to past problems on the farm, and that's almost never the case. We see some other clostridial diseases, Clostridium perfringens, and those sort of things sometimes in 2 to 3 week old calves. It is incredibly rare to see true blackleg in very young calves, but some farms that have a lot of disease exposure, a lot of organisms in the soil and stuff, that's back to we may do things a little differently on a farm because of past problems. Just on a farm. In general, for across the board for most all of y'all, that would not be my recommendation, but we would adjust that depending on farms past problems.
So what would be I guess, what will happen to the calf? I mean, what is gonna be?
So the possible downside of doing that is you think that helps and it doesn't, they don't respond to the vaccine, so now you don't vaccinate them when I'd really like you to. That's the scare and the possible downside to vaccinating them then, is you say, well, I already vaccinated them, so I'm not gonna vaccinate them when they're 2 to 3 months old. And now a huge chunk of those calves aren't protected because that's not a very good time to vaccinate them. That's the harm, the potential harm to that.
So could that go back to the mama?
Could it go? Absolutely, it could. If I were having very, very, very young calves having Clostridial disease, I would do what this lady was asking about, and I would vaccinate those cows, try to get antibodies into the calf. What I would do. Anybody else? Well, I appreciate, thank y'all. I'll be here if you have any questions or anything. I'll certainly be here. Appreciate y'all having me here tonight.